Good afternoon, Narrative family. I don't know where you are or when you will be seeing this recording, but we are recording on Indigenous Peoples Day in the United States. And my name is Tanya Pinkins, and I am coming to you from the indigenous land of the Nagbi, the Bugle, the Guna, the Embera, the Wunan, the Bribri, and the Naso Jerdi in the Isthmus of Panama. I'm a heavyset brown woman with brown and golden locks. I've got on a blue dress with some embroidered pattern and purple lipstick and amber earrings. And I am so excited today to introduce the Knarrative community to this woman who is a mover and a shaker. She's an attorney, an entrepreneur, a thinker, an organizer, a connector, and she is going to share with us about XR. When I met her, she said, XR is the future and Black people better get on board. So please join me in welcoming Lauren Ruffin of Crux and many other things.
Thanks, Tanya. And I want to take the liberty of amending your audio description because your dress is fly. You did not do.
This is the $15 dress. This is the best $15 I've ever spent.
It is gorgeous. You just said I'm wearing a dress with embroidered. No, this dress, y'all, I'm just going to tell you, it is so beautiful if you cannot see it. But I'm Lauren Ruffin. I'm dialing in from Albuquerque, New Mexico. New Mexico's home to 19 Pueblo tribes who are still here. Some of them are fortunate to be on their sovereign land, but all of this land is theirs. So, but thank you so much for having me. I'm always excited to talk about XR and what we've been up to.
What is XR and why does it matter to Black people?
Yeah, jump right in.
I'm that girl.
Oh yeah, I know. So XR is an ever evolving field that is mostly, it changes the way that we're able as an audience to experience stories. So rather than what I believe is sort of a 100-year blip on a screen with us dealing with these sort of flat screens, it's my belief that we're going to continue to grow and get back to where we really were, which was storytelling's always been interactive for us. Ever since the days when we were sort of painting caves or bringing artifacts back to our villages to have people feel them and pass them around and tell stories about these things interactivity is there. We spent the last 120 years looking at just screens and movie theaters and in our own homes. And we've been passive consumers, but VR and AR, XR, MR are really ways for audiences to begin to engage with the story, to have some agency over the story. And for those of us who tell stories to be able to really think creatively about, how do we want to build a world that the viewer can really experience.
Now, this section of Knarrative is called the Michaud Media Mansion, and I asked them to name it Media Mansion because, when film happened, it was a new media, and XR is a new media. You said something to me about like all the white boys know this, but Black people don't. What do you remember that?
Well, I think that was probably with regard to where. So let me back up. VR and AR at the vanguard of how we're going to interact with computers moving forward. That's what white guys know. Right now, when you're out buying a headset, if you buy a headset, typically it's to play games, maybe to do some social interactivity in an immersive space, or to just sort of play around on a headset. The long game for this is for people to really engage with spatial computing, which is, as much as everyone who's in VR hates using this analogy, but it's what Tony Stark uses. It's the computer is around you, you're interacting with it with your hands, you're building things in real time, and we're at the point where we can begin to blend and interact with computers in a different way than we ever have before. The keyboard will be gone, the mouse will be gone, and the computer will be existing in a space around you. That's what white boys know. That's why I think it's important for us to get into this now, because our natural way of being is to interact fluidly with our environment. But I think in 10 years, we won't have a mouse, we won't have a keyboard. Some of the things that we're doing with audio, just sort of talking to Alexa, if you have one of those in your homes, that's sort of the first step. But interacting with computers will become very, very seamless. And it's really important for Black folks to be at the vanguard of interacting with this now, because we're determining the rules around privacy, security, what devices look like. And it's really important for us to be there because we all know that we have really, really unique privacy concerns, security concerns, and data retention concerns. Because all those things have always been used against us. So how can we really use those things and get in now to really liberate us from the sort of tyranny of how computers have been used in the past?
So what is Crux? Why Crux?
Oh, what is Crux? That's a great question. So Crux is, we started off about 4 years ago as a community of Black creators who were already working in VR and AR. We've since grown and sort of pivoted to still be a community, both online and in person, but also to really start thinking about distribution. And we've gotten into randomly during the pandemic doing a fair amount of service work in the event space. So in the event space and audience engagement space. So we do everything from custom VR plays. We've done a couple of plays with large organizations, Actors Theater Louisville. In VR, we did our own VR series where we hired 3 Black female playwrights, about 8 Black actors, and 2 Black directors to do 3 short plays in VR last fall. And then we're doing traditional event type stuff. So, International Documentary Association did their conference last year. We produced that. It was 4,000 people online for 6 days. Pretty intense, but we do a really good job. We prioritize accessibility and inclusion and, little things that matter. Like we make sure that, our ASL interpreters are all Black. Whenever we're doing, I don't know, we do some weird stuff, but it's super fun. I think our team's really thoughtful about it. And so that's what Crux is.
And all of these links to these plays that you've done, can we post those links so people have access to that material? If they go to the Crux website, can they find?
Yeah, absolutely. And for the plays, we actually have a separate site. It's imagination.black.
Okay, imagination.black. We definitely need that. Now, I was just at CruxCon in New Mexico a few weeks ago, and you were talking about going off to a fellowship because of an idea that you have. So I'm not going to even try to re-articulate your idea since you're here, but it had to do with what I heard and understood of Black people over-indexing on the web.
Yeah, well, I think over-indexing is what I called it. I think we index just right for us. We do tend to have higher numbers of us than sort of higher percentage of Black folks participate in entertainment and design and creative sectors as compared to other communities. And we're going to continue to see that as we watch young people continue to become content creators on YouTube or OnlyFans or TikTok or whatever. And so my fellowship is really exploring, and I'm working with a group of students at Arizona State University. I want to know how they're making money right now online. I want to know how either, before the pandemic or because of the pandemic, has that shifted how they think they're going to make money in the future? Do they see having a 9-to-5 or working at a traditional sort of arts organizations or traditional film organization? Do they still want to do that? Or are they really planning to live a life that's pretty free and independent? So they can travel the world and be freelancers. The problem with freelancing is it's really hard to build capital that way, unless you're in sort of the top echelon of influencers online or content creators online. So that we won't, unless we build infrastructure for those folks who would consider sort of middle class digital entrepreneurs, they won't be able to get mortgages. They won't be able to get traditional loans to grow their business. There is working capital for them. So we have to build the infrastructure for them to be able to be successful. And so that's really what I'm studying, sort of how has the pandemic and the rise of so many online creativity platforms changed the way Black people think about work? And what are the financial infrastructures that we need to build now so that these people who are younger than us have a shot at actually getting into middle class with their creativity, instead of what we're seeing right now with a number of, union negotiations happening in the film sector. I don't know if you've been following the film crew situation, which is, I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was that bad. But for me, it really is how do we create systems that really allow these young, Black, beautiful, brilliant creators to be able to thrive and have a happy, decent, sort of good life.
Now, you had mentioned something about a new way to do loans.
Yeah, and that's that attached. So once you get to the point where we understand how folks are making a living online, we can begin to think about different loan vehicles for them to be able to access capital. So I'm thinking about alternative credit scores. So many of us are using Venmo, Cash App, pay people back. Well, that doesn't get rolled up into your credit score. And so many Black folks that I know operate out, even, I've been surprised working with creators over the last couple of years as deeply as I have. The number of folks who are running their business on PayPal and don't have a bank account. The hard conversations around having to say, like, I actually can't wire you. I can't PayPal you $22,000 for your work. Like, and then being like, I'm going to have to go to a check cashing place. And I'm like, it's predatory and it's awful. So we have to build structures to help folks be able to get working capital they need to grow their business. Alternative credit scores are a key metric that I think would really help. And then once we figure out what the process is for coming up with a new credit score, because the 5 C's of credit really aren't for us. They've systemically locked us out for decades. So my friend Vanessa Roanhorse, who runs an organization called Native Women Lead, they just won the Equality Can't Wait Challenge. It's $10 million. So we've been working together to really talk about, begin to build the 5 R's of rematriation, which is an entirely different way of thinking about what your credit score could look like and how you could access capital. What kind of work do you do? Is it valuable to your community? Do you give back to your community? Do you have a reputation for paying people back? That sort of stuff that, doesn't happen in the 5 C's of credit is really important. And I think lastly, I'll say that, when you start thinking about these alternative lending vehicles, the default rate is much lower than it is if you're going to get something from a big bank, because it's a relationship. Like, Tanya, if you come to me and you say, I need $50,000 and we live 3 doors down from each other, you have a much stronger likelihood of, well, either you're not coming out your house anymore or you're going to pay me back.
Right.
Or we're going to have a conversation about why you can't pay me back because we're neighbors. And it'll look like quickly rethinking the terms of the agreement. It'll look like, well, if you can't pay me $50,000, you can give me 30 in 5 years. That sort of conversation that's really been left out of the equation, which is historically how we've always done lending. It's only since the 80s when rich white people stole a bunch of money in the 80s, and all of us are paying for it with the savings and loans crisis. So I want to get back to that, to community-based lending, to real relationships and lending, and figuring out how we can use technology to help us plug all these different apps together so we can really understand how Black people spend money.
Excellent. So I know that you have raised money for organizations before, and it's something that you're very good at. I wanted to, because this is new in the news, to hear your thoughts on the Oxy Carlos Watson event.
I should have known you were going to ask me something like that. That's some wild shit, right? Also illegal.
Like, do we like him for scamming the system, or what? What? We all have to pay for that. All as brown people, we have to pay for that. But what is that?
I think for me, there are a couple of things that are in this that, like, I feel like we'll never know what actually happened. They're saying that he says that his business partner has mental health issues. He didn't know about it. I find that to not be credible at all. No, I'm not, because I think it's hard enough for Black folks to get ownership. And I know this is like a tired ass argument, but it's the reality. Like, we don't get a whole lot of shots. Like, it's going to be hard for an organization like Crux to raise dollars from media investors because Carlos Watson's organization straight up lied, like just lied. And that the whole phone call with Goldman, the fake phone call with Goldman, that was the tip of the iceberg, I think. But it does make it harder for the rest of us.
I guess my thought on it is it's a tax write-off for everybody. Nobody lost any money. They get to write it all off. And, when I look at some of these quote unquote charitable organizations, some of them are really run like money laundering organizations. When you're raising, $200 million and 2% of it is going to serve people, this is just like a great way to help your friends launder money and get a salary for doing so. Yeah.
Well, that's how the nonprofit sector started in the 60s.
Tell us more.
That's the root of it. Some rich folks wanted a write-off for the artists they were supporting, and essentially work with the IRS to get the C3 designation created. So that's all it's ever been. People have gotten more sophisticated with it. And, you know, similar to the Carlos Watson thing, like there are a number of charities doing good, meaningful, important work. They're often the ones that are least funded. And then, yeah, the rest of them are typical money laundering organizations for one way or another. And the IRS doesn't have the resources to crack down and figure out who's doing what. Yeah. And I to sort of make a segue around the Sacklers, you know, that their money with the opioids. I mean, there's that you can't talk about like money laundering without talking about the fact that like they're drug dealers. And essentially have not really been called to task for that. Their names are still on buildings at Harvard. And yeah, I mean, that's all made possible by the nonprofit sector. They figure they can launder their reputation by making financial donations to well-known institutions.
Okay. Now, you know, as we get into this media thing, I'm getting controversial now. We were having a conversation about sex work. And I know that you're working with a consortium. And so essentially, it sounds like sex work is becoming a kind of a entertainment media, which it kind of always has been. I think VR really blew up in the porn world. So can you talk a little bit about why it's important for Black and Brown people to be able to organize and sort of to unionize this work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a couple of things. The first thing that so many that consumers need to know is the porn industry is larger than the top 10 tech companies in the United States put together. So there's one company, MindGeek, who runs the large percentage of all the porn websites you go to. That industry in and of itself is worth more than the top 10 tech companies. So it's worth paying. Now, if you were to go online and look at porn, you would notice that so many of the people who are working in porn are Black and brown.
What do you mean?
You would notice that a lot of the women are Black and brown. People are being fetishized. They're Black and brown people. We are acting, we are performing in these highly unregulated spaces because those of us who aren't involved in that industry think it's a little too dirty for us to touch. Over the last couple of years, digital sites that don't require actual sex work, their content creators have popped up like OnlyFans. In my opinion, and I know you and I have started to have a couple conversations, in my opinion, it's really important for us to recognize that for many BIPOC, female presenting people, sex work is one of their only opportunities to reach middle class. If you are a young person without familial support, if you've got, for whatever reason, either your family can't support you or because you've been in the foster care system, if you are a single mother who can't finish college because you need childcare and you don't have any familial support to help you with that, online adult content creation becomes a viable, safe way for you to have a flexible schedule, to make good money, really good money, to support your family, save money, buy a house, and all those other things. For that reason, I think it's really important for those of us who aren't in the industry to be really supportive of sex workers, strippers, everyone else who's trying to unite to build their own platforms and really unionize so they have some basic rights with regard to who owns their content, and if they are doing in-person work, how many hours they're shooting, how do they have a say over those contracts, what's equitable and fair pay, and what does safety on set look like. So for me, it's a similar labor workers' rights conversation. We just happen to be dealing with people whose work is sex.
And so I must play devil's advocate. Would these people be doing sex work if there was some other option for them to make money? Like, who would ever want to do sex work?
I think for a lot of people, sex work, in particular, digital sex work. So again, content creation where they're in their house by themselves shooting. They're able to make a lot more money. It's easier work than, say, working in a restaurant where you've got, either your boss is playing grab ass or customers are being assholes. I think there are lots of people who would prefer to do that.
And, my concern is always the area of sex work that people are being coerced, trafficked, which can happen online and offline. Mm-hmm. How does having an organization or label rules around it affect the illegal, coerced, violent trafficking aspect of that business?
You've worked in film.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between being on a set that is regulated, licensed, where all the folks are unionized, as opposed to being on one that's not?
Well, if you're on a union set, you have union reps who are supposed to show up at the set and make sure that all the rules are being followed. Everyone that you work for has to sign contracts that are looked at by the union, looked at by lawyers, and people follow up on those contracts years later to make sure that if you weren't paid, they're going to go back and collect it with interest. The union also has the ability to shut a production down if it violates any of the standards or rules that have been set for use of its members.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I think folks who are legitimate in the porn industry want.
Now, we know that getting this group of people who are legitimately content creators is not going to shut down this violent, coercive, big business thing at all.
I actually, well, two separate answers. One, I think having a union or having an overarching regulatory body to do the equivalent of like what Blood Diamonds did, right? Now you know your diamonds are safe. I do think that would be really helpful in the industry. Secondly, if we think for a second that large platforms like Facebook, like Google don't, and like our government aren't able to track, given what we know about surveillance, if they really wanted to stop it, they could. So this is to me, it's a policy and a moral issue more than like
a lack of will. We don't have the will to stop it.
Yeah, we continue to pit legitimate sex workers who are of age and who are consensual, acting like they're the problem with this whole dark web thing that happens when young kids are being trafficked and when people from developing countries are trafficked, from the global south primarily. They're two separate issues. What we need to do is make sure that the government and that large platforms, Facebook in particular, which enables a lot of this behavior, that they have a reason to get that off of their platforms and to make sure that these communities of people who are trading porn, that's illegal porn, are off the web and are prosecuted. But they're really two separate issues. And
the algorithm, the exhaust, can tell exactly who those people are. Like
they know everything about us.
They know all that information.
Yeah, if they know everything about us, all of us.
I had another little piece of a question about that. So you're a lawyer. So
I have a law degree.
You have a law degree.
I am not barred to practice in any state in the United States.
Okay, you have a law degree. From a moral issue thing, I was just watching. My name is Polly Murray, and just all the brilliant arguments that she put forward, way, way ahead of our time. What are you seeing as the argument that goes forward to go at these arguments of morality that don't match reality? Like the, right to life doesn't match reality because children are born and then they end up being trafficked.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, there's a gaping loophole in our digital laws right now, which I thought by now would become a really big talking point. It's sort of been buried, but I expect in the next year it's going to be big. It's called Section 230. Section 230 does a lot of things. It essentially made our modern internet possible.
Okay.
The way that it's currently written, platforms, websites, are not held liable for the content that their users put on them. This is at the heart of so many different issues around free speech on Facebook, around January 6th. What are these platforms, when you allow people to organize towards violence or toward criminal activity, do we think platforms should be held liable? Right now, they're not. I believe that if we were to hold them liable, this conversation that you and I were having would be it would be so clear for us. But there's a loophole in that particular law that a lot of activists, including folks who are, Strippers United that I mentioned earlier, a lot of sex workers are organizing to make sure platforms are held liable for the illegal behavior that happens on them.
Now, you told me something, I feel like at CruxCon, someone said something about this is the first time in history where young people want to be content creators more than they want to be doctors. Did you say that?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's the data. Yeah. It's wild.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. No, the number of kids who want to be doctors or lawyers is declining drastically. They all want to be online content creators, digital makers. They want to be crew. They want to, it's actually at a point where they feel like, partially because platforms make it so easy for them to create. TikTok is a place where you share videos, but also where you make them. So yeah, a lot of them see that as that's what they want to do. It's what they like doing, making dances. Wouldn't you want to do that? Like, I can't dance.
So I
can't dance or sing. Like I'm obvious, I was destined to be behind the scenes advocating. But no, I mean, this is the first time in history that like more kids, people don't want to go to college anymore.
So
I mean, we're and the value proposition of college has shifted.
So XR VR is going to be huge, and that's where our future is headed for our young people as well.
That's what I'm betting on. But regardless, we know spatial computing is going to be huge. So if we can use creativity to get young people in there, then yeah, I'm all for it.
Is the spatial computing thing, is it ready? Like, is the military already using it? Is it just a few years to consumer, or is it still just imaginative?
It exists in pockets. I won't speak to military applications. But I mean, yeah, it's a lot closer. And that's the thing I tell people all the time, like, especially the clients I work with. All the stuff that you think is far off and super expensive is typically already ready and much less expensive than you think it is. So, you know, the barriers are coming down for us to get involved. What we really have now is just this sort of knowledge gap, and sort of imagination gap, possibility gap. But yeah, a lot of this stuff is here and ready to go.
And so if we want to step into even explore, where do we start?
In the VR space, well, I mean, chances are you're already using AR on your phone. If you shopped at IKEA, they have an AR app. I mean, pretty much every retailer you use has an AR app at this point where you can put furniture around your house and see what it looks like. In the VR space, in the last year, Oculus has come out with a pretty high quality consumer headset at a decent price point. It's $299. Lots of free games on it. Lots of free social media applications. So like, you're in Panama, I'm in Mexico, we could hang out and play a game together in VR. I played Cards Against Humanity in VR with a bunch of people. It's hilarious. So yeah, lots of games and fun application just to jump in and sort of get a sense of what it is. But I would say, yeah, the Oculus Quest 2 is where to start.
Now, the Oculus Quest 2, I know you can have a keyboard. You need a keyboard for that sometimes if you want to type things in to.
Oh, well, yeah, if you want to. I recommend like just playing games on it. Don't do too much work. Just play some
games. I don't really play games. Like if I'm going into the VR world, I want to go into an immersive story. I want to see how, for me, what interesting about there is the way it's capacity for empathy. It allows me to be inside other people's lives.
Yeah, and you don't need a keyboard for that. Leave the keyboard at home. Nobody's trying to type in a headset.
Here's my last question. Last bit of controversy as we end this section, has nothing to do with the VR. Weigh in for me about the Dave Chappelle controversy.
I have not followed it.
Okay.
I know that, I've been camping all weekend. So I've been gone since Thursday night, and I just got back last night, and I saw something about transphobe. He is a transphobe. I know that much, but I haven't followed what he did now.
And why do you think he's a transphobe? Just curious.
And this is a generalization. I'll never understand why people punch down.
And what does punch down mean? Tell me what that means.
I've never understood why folks think it's funny to make fun of or to laugh at people who are legitimately, like, the trans community is being murdered, right? Like, there's no need to poke fun at communities that are already suffering. So that's what I mean by punching down. I felt like when you go back and watch old movies and you watch white people make fun of black people, that sort of shit, I just don't think it's funny. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No,
I must push back. So, I mean, black people are being murdered too. Black non-trans people, black trans people, black people are being murdered. And I feel like, for me personally, humor is what has saved my life in most of the most horrible times of my life. I mean, sometimes I remember when I was going through my custody battle, I said a prayer. I said, you know, if I reach the point where I can look back this and find some humor, then I will know that I have survived. So I feel like humor is a space of healing to me. I'm always looking for how do you find the humor in everything, because I also think it's an entry point for people to access things that they would normally just turn their back on it.
Yeah, I get that. But I don't know that that's, you know, as someone who's not trans, it's not my job to define for them what's funny. You know, I've been queer my whole life. I think that queer people used to be funnier. I'm still funny as shit, but I'm also super privileged. You know, like I'm a queer person. I'm a typically the youngest, blackest, queerest person in every room I'm in. And I have to deal with the fact that something about me and my personality, my ability to make light of the fact that I'm a triple threat marginalized person. Actually, for some reason, there's something about my brand of radical fuck you-ness that makes white people comfortable. And I got to go to bed every night being like, I just told you to your face, I think you're a racist asshole, and you invited me back tomorrow. Like, so I think humor is necessary, but trans people don't think that shit's funny. They haven't found that humor yet, just like you probably did when you were going through a divorce. And hopefully they get there. Hopefully that the trans community is able to, and again, I'm not speaking for folks, but I actually think that you have to wait for people to signal when they think it's funny. And I get the sense that, and Dave's been doing this for years. Like, I don't know what he said this time, but he's been doing this for years. He also had said some weird Me Too shit, didn't he?
I love him. And I think that everything he says is spot on, but I'm speaking from an artist's point of view in that I think that artists are very intentional. It's not off the cuff. It's not an improvisation. If Dave is saying things about Me Too or that, he has thought about it, and he's thought about his audience, and he's thought, what is the thing that I'm going to say that's going to make people like, whoa.
Well, there's an argument made that Dave's audience is white people.
I don't know. I only know him I didn't watch the Dave Chappelle show, so I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. Well, there's a theory, or one could be said that because Dave grew up relatively privileged in a suburban household, that some of his tropes of black people, like the crackhead, which I also think is funny, were actually reductive, and were designed to cater to white audiences more than to black folks who lived in the hood. And again, I can't speak to that because I grew up relatively privileged in the middle of nowhere. So, but I do think it's complicated. I prefer Cat Williams. I think Cat's smarter, and but Cat is not as refined as Dave is. So yeah, and Cat's take is like, if you can't tell jokes without hurting somebody's feelings, you're not a very good comedian.
And most of the comedians I know say funny is mean. And what about, do you like Hannah Gadsby? Because she is.
No, I don't know her.
Oh my God. Hannah Gadsby is my muse. She's got 2 shows on Netflix called Nanette and Douglas. I saw Douglas twice in person. This is a person who, as a creative artist, has taken everything that makes her unique and different. Like the way you said, you're a triple threat, you know, oppressed person or whatever. She has taken all of that and made a piece of art out of it that makes me laugh and makes me weep. I've watched Nanette 15 times. I would watch it again and again because it is the epitome of what artists do with their pain and their suffering. They turn it into to something that is a bridge to other people.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference I think that's the problem with Dave, because people in a community can laugh about things and make fun of things, including themselves, but it's real dicey to do it about a community that's not yours, one that you don't claim.
Well, you know, if you watch her shows, you will see that she gets as much hate as he does. You can't cancel her because she's from a community that she can't, but she even takes that and
Yeah.
brings it into her art.
Don't you think people are just grumpy all the time? Like there's all, I mean, I don't know. There's some, I guess I was raised by somebody who was like, and we've talked about this before, but like I wake up every day and say like, what awful shit's going to happen today and how am I going to deal with it? You know, like I guess nobody ever told me life was supposed to be sort of not threatening. I kind of think we're here to run the gauntlet and, you know, go to sleep when it's time to go to sleep. But I also know that there are a lot of people, my wife included, who was trying to live her life and expects a better world every day, and it just ain't here yet. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, so everybody's going to go to crux.com, correct?
The easiest way to get us is crux.pory, P-O-R-Y .app, A-P-P.
Okay. What's that
But
mean?
crux.black would likely redirect the people there too.
And why is it in this different format than .com that we mostly know?
Because I use it, because I got nerdy and used a different CMS, and you know, that's why.
What's a CMS?
A different content management system for my website.
Content management system. So .com is a content management system.
.com's a dope. Tanya, we're gonna have a whole separate conversation. You
People
better
need
take
to
us
know
out a whole.
this is stuff that we don't know, and so to have an opportunity to have someone to explain these things. I mean, like my mother died at 69. She wasn't even really using the internet at all. She wasn't even doing emails.
Oh yeah, no, my mother died before the internet existed. She died in 1992. My dad, on the other hand, is in his 70s, and he's still working, and he's a principal and he's been a superintendent. He's like, these people are not going to think that I can't handle this. So I taught him how to turn on a computer in 1998, and he has been chicken pecking away ever since.
Awesome. So I want all of us to not be intimidated, terrified, or to feel like the world has passed us by when it comes to spatial computing, AR, XR. I'm actually going to have Blair Russell on later today and talk about his work. So thank you so much, Lauren.
Yeah, Blair can talk to you about Black imagination. That was his idea.
Oh, okay. So I'll ask him about Black imagination.
Totally.
So thank you so much. Love to you.
Good seeing you.
Blessings. And yeah. Okay, I think I stopped recording.
Okay.